Dear colleagues, please be seated. We will start with proposed changes in the composition of committees which have been published in Document Commissions 2024-01 Addendum 2. Is there any objection to these changes? So, since there are no objections, they are adopted. And the first item on the agenda is the continuation of the debate on the progress report of the Bureau and the Standing Committee, presented earlier by Mr. Tini Cox. This will be combined with consideration of the report of the Ad Hoc Committee of the Bureau on the observation of the early parliamentary elections in Serbia, 17th of December 2023, presented by Mr. Stefan Sena. The debate will conclude at 4:30 p.m. I will therefore interrupt the list of speakers at around 4:25 p.m. I remind members that speaking time is 3 minutes, and I now call Mr. Stefan Sena to present the report of the Ad Hoc Committee of the Bureau on the observation of the early parliamentary elections in Serbia. Dear Stefan, you have 3 minutes.
Wir waren für eine Pre-Electoral Mission und für eine Wahlbeobachtung in Serbien. Insgesamt waren wir 23 Mitglieder von 12 verschiedenen Mitgliedstaaten und die Venice Commission war mit uns. Schon bei der Pre-Electoral Mission sind uns ein paar Dinge aufgefallen, die wir sehr besorgt berichtet haben, zum Beispiel das Negative Campaigning oder zum Beispiel die schweren Attacken gegen Opposition und gegen Journalisten. Am 17. Dezember waren wir dann ein gemeinsames internationales Beobachtungsteam, OSZE, ODIHR, Europäisches Parlament und BASE. Und wir kommen ziemlich einheitlich zu einem Schluss, dass technisch gesprochen die Wahl sehr gut administriert war. Die Wahllokale waren offen, alles Wahlmaterial war vorhanden. Aber politisch gesehen war diese Wahl einfach nicht fair und wir haben eine ganze Reihe von Unstimmigkeiten und Irregularities gefunden, wie zum Beispiel kopierte Stimmzettel, was wir in der ODIHR-Sprache Bulletbox-Stuffing nennen oder Gruppenvoting oder Wählermobilität. Wir haben überhaupt das Wort Voter Migration dort eingebracht, die mit Bussen gekommen sind. Und was uns sehr gewundert hat, die extreme Rolle des Präsidenten der Republik Serbien, der kein Kandidat war, aber auf allen Stimmzetteln, egal ob auf einer Stadt, auf dem Parlament oder in der Vojvodina, Platz 1. Und ein Präsident sollte normalerweise ein Land einen, aber der Präsident war eines der stärksten in der gesamten Auseinandersetzung und Wahlkampagne. Und warum auch unfair? Ungefähr 92% aller Medieninhalte war von der Regierungspartei und vom Präsidenten bestimmt und nur 8% über die gesamte Opposition und diese 8% in einem sehr, sehr negativen Ton. Was wir festgestellt haben, ist, dass nach wie vor die Wählerlisten zu entwickeln sind. Und das war schon ein Vorschlag der Venice Commission und der ODIHR, aber das blieb unberücksichtigt. Und ein Punkt, den möchte ich hier speziell, weil Serbien ist unter Monitoring, wenn man innerhalb von 4 Jahren 3-mal vorzeitig wählt, dann macht man das System der Demokratie, das System der Wahlen und das System des Parlamentarismus schwach. Man will nicht, dass die Parlamentarier offensichtlich das Handwerk lernen, das notwendig ist, um in einem Parlament zu bestehen. Deshalb haben wir vorgeschlagen, so wie wir das in Nordmazedonien gemacht haben und letztes Jahr in Bosnien, machen wir ein Post-Electoral-Seminar. Ich glaube, das wäre für alle Seiten hilfreich und stoppen wir die Gewalt auf den Straßen und diskutieren wir das in einer anständigen und guten Form. Und in Kürze wird der Kongress auch zu der nächsten Wahl hinfahren. Das wäre meiner Meinung nach eines der wichtigen Dinge. Danke.
Thank you, Mr. Senak. In the debate, I call first now Mr. Frank Swabe, President of the Socialists, Greens and Democrats, on behalf of his party. Mr. Swabe, you have 3 minutes.
Dear Mr. President, I didn't have the opportunity till now, so congratulations from here, Mr. President. And I really want to use the opportunity to thank Tini Cox. As someone who has a very clear position in the spectrum in Netherlands, is, let's say, located quite left, I would think so. Maybe other from Netherlands have other ideas. With clear ideas, I think you represent really this parliamentary assembly from the middle. You was the one who lead the assembly in the last years with your wisdom, with your knowledge, and with a kind of balance as well. Always when it was difficult, you tried to organize a unity in this organization. And I think it could not be much more important than in the situation of the Russian aggression towards Ukraine. Maybe some of our colleagues didn't expect it, that it was you at the end who could unify this assembly behind a very clear position with the unanimous decision at the end, what makes very clear to the Committee of Ministers that they had no other choice than to follow these ideas and this advice from us. And I think you play a very important role. And another thing was the Reykjavik summit. As I mentioned in our group already, where he was guest before, it was Michele Nicoletti, our former chair of the group and the former president of the assembly, who had the idea of such a summit. But at the end, I think it makes a lot of sense that we fulfill this under your presidency. So I really want to thank you in the name of our group, of the Socialists, Democrats and Greens, very much for all your work you did. So on the one hand, we have to say thank you. On the other hand, it's a very sad day because, as you mentioned before already, we lose some very important members in this parliamentary assembly. It was Dick Marty, who makes history for this organization with the maybe most well-known report about CIA prisons, illegal prisons in Europe. He passed away, and I have to say, and this has touched me personally in my group very much, it is Tony Lloyd, who was under us some weeks ago, and at the end he passed away now. He had to die. Someone who was a very, 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 very well-organized guy and always tried to balance as well, very warm-hearted, and at the end he could die in the arms or in his family. But it's a big loss for us and I think for the whole assembly. The last seconds I would like to use to thank Stefan Schenach very much for the whole election of the Evasion Mission in Serbia. And as you mentioned before as well, we are not to ask for elections, or we don't say elections are not right in a country. We just can describe the situation, and you describe that these elections are not elections which we would like to see due to our standards, and we have to really ask Serbia to do it better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Svabe. On the behalf of the European People's Party, I call now Mr. Anastasios Hadjivassiliou. 3 minutes, Mr. Hadjivassiliou.
Thank you, Mr. President. Congratulations on your election. I declare myself as a proud Greek deputy, and I'm sure that your mandate will be marked with achievements and lasting positive impact. So, dear colleagues, according to the remarks and the conclusions of the National Election Observation Mission, where PACE members participated, there is a consensus in this room that the December elections in Serbia, though pluralistic and technically well administered, were marked by irregularities and inefficiencies, partly overshadowing the whole political process in this country. There is no need to repeat what our esteemed colleague has mentioned in his report. There were indeed both structural and procedural deficiencies that need to be immediately addressed. First, the frequency of early elections in Serbia undermines the public trust in democratic institutions. Second, the campaign period marked by harsh rhetoric, media bias, and the strong presence of the Serbian president distracted voters from the democratic process. And third, yes, there were procedural deficiencies, including inconsistency in voting and counting. Dear colleagues, we strongly believe in Serbia's European future, and this is why we urge Serbian authorities to demonstrate a strong political will to reform and align with the European democratic standards as soon as possible. We eagerly anticipate the forthcoming report and recommendations from the OSCE and ODIHR and expect their prompt implementation well before the next electoral cycle. Reforms are necessary, and we call Belgrade to act as soon as possible. Moreover, we do expect that any credible reports of irregularities will be thoroughly and transparently followed up by the relevant domestic and national authorities. It is essential, dear colleagues, that all concerns raised are addressed with the utmost seriousness to uphold the democratic process. Finally, dear colleagues, we strongly encourage the political leadership in Serbia to foster a constructive and inclusive dialogue that spans the entire political spectrum. It's time for Serbia to move forward towards reforms and embrace a future where the democratic process is well respected. Serbia has an important role to play in the Western Balkans, and strong democratic institutions will be to the benefit not only of the Serbian people, but the whole neighborhood itself. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Hadjivassiliou. Now, on behalf of the European Conservative Party, I will call Mr. Ian Liddell-Granger, the President of the party. Mr. Granger, you have the floor.
It doesn't work. It's still open here.
The microphone's broken. Oh, hang on. It's working. Thank you, French technology. I'm very grateful indeed for the words I've heard about Tony Lloyd, David Wiltshire, and also our colleague John Hull, who's extremely ill in hospital. I'm very grateful for everybody here for the best wishes they've given to the British delegation. Oh, for God's sake, the British delegation. I will say that there are a lot of challenges that face this organisation. It is very easy for us, especially where the war in Ukraine is concerned, to be able to cast stones. This war is being fought by proxy. Unfortunately, the Americans, Germans, British, and many other countries, France and others, have to make sure that we don't let the aggressor win. We started out with that when the war started. We have to keep going on that. And there are colleagues, and I can understand why, are getting a little fatigued, but we must not weaken. This is a matter of principle. We stood back where Georgia, we stood back when the Stans came under threat. We've stood back too many times and let the bear get its own way. We must keep going. We've also got to be careful what we do with this place. 75 years next year, pretty good. I've just challenged the credentials of Germany for reasons I feel are important, but we must be careful, and I do take this on the chin, as we'd say in English. Challenging credentials is a way of getting what you want to get across. Partly PR, partly is an important point of principle, I believe. We've challenged Azerbaijan. I'm one of the co-rapporteurs with Lisa Christopherson, a great colleague. It's difficult to know what happens next. If we throw out Azerbaijan, what have we actually achieved? What have we done? It's great for our morale. It makes us look morally upright. But actually, we should be there trying to strengthen their parliament, strengthen them by going out there, strengthen them by holding their feet to the fire, we'd say in English. Myself and Lisa have tried to do that. We will continue to try to do that. Yes, I agree they should let us go to their elections. I think that's fundamental. But I do think we must be careful what we wish for. But on the larger picture, if we've made 75 years and we're getting that way, then we've got to define what we actually stand for. And I think we haven't got there yet. I strongly believe this place is trying to do too much, too little, too late, and too badly. We are still not getting reports that actually make sense in the wider world. I do a lot of reports with other hats I wear. I can say these are some of the longest, most difficult reports to read, and I'm English. So therefore, I would ask colleagues and urge colleagues from across the political divide and across our nations that we must work together to define what it means to be a democrat in the 21st century, where wars are all around us, where sectarianism, where difficulties with people are there and democracy is under threat. If we don't think now, others will do it for us, and then we will all fail. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Little Granger. Thank you so much. And now we proceed with the president of the ALDE group, Mr. Julian Boulay. Mr. Boulay, you have the floor.
Mr. President. Au nom du groupe ALDE, je voudrais commencer par rendre hommage à Dick Marty, notre ancien membre et président de la Commission des affaires juridiques et de suivi, qui est décédé le 28 décembre. Dick Marty a été membre de notre Assemblée et notre groupe pendant de nombreuses années. Pour ce temps, il est resté un ami proche. D'autres, comme moi, n'ont pas eu l'honneur de le connaître personnellement. Mais pour nous tous, Dick Marty restera un exemple de courage politique exceptionnel, avec un sens aigu de la justice, qualité indispensable pour défendre les droits de l'homme. Il est véritable fait connaître notre Assemblée dans le monde entier. Je vous remercie, Monsieur Cox, pour votre déclaration suite au décès de Monsieur Marty et pour vos aimables paroles. Dear Tini, on behalf of ALDE, I want to thank you for what you did for this Assembly. You did beyond expectations. Usually, when in office, people are being trusted less after fulfilling the mandate. Now, the trust of us towards you has doubled. Thank you. You did really well. I want to congratulate the new President, Mr. Rousopoulos. You have a great heritage to continue, and I wish, on behalf of us, good luck with that. Great congratulations go to both Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova, as the European Council in December has opened the EU accession negotiations, and this is a historical moment that has to be celebrated. Now, I want to congratulate Ukraine for their great amendment on the bill on national minorities that has been amended according to the recommendations of the Venice Commission. That being said, till now, we have been all working on having a registry of damage, that is an institution to be founded in The Hague. We need to work now on the compensation mechanism, and we should not stop fighting for what is to be the International Tribunal judging the crimes of aggression of Russia in Ukraine. I will not repeat what Mr. Shenak has told us about Serbia. The situation is very dangerous there. In the light of these challenges, we have invited within our group for an exchange of views the representatives of the Serbian opposition for Wednesday morning. And I really hope that, for instance, the monitoring committee will be inviting in the near future the whole united Serbian opposition for an exchange of views, because we need to also know their story at very top European level. We've had COVID, we've had war, but this organization also deserves a reward, a great achievement. For instance, having Kosovo on board, and that decision to be taken this year for the ministerial meeting is to take place in May. In order to that happen, I'm looking forward to Ms. Bakoyannis' report and a clear agenda on adopting that report in April. Now, I want to thank Alex Poche for the great thing he's done for this assembly. I also want to congratulate Davor Iverstier, the new chair of the EPP. I want to mention the dire situation of the political prisoners in both Belarus and Russia. We should help them without having any hesitation. And last but not the least, I would like to welcome the great, fantastic news last month issued by the Pope Francis approving the blessing of the same-sex couples. This is fantastic news, and we believe that is a great step towards equality of people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Boulay. Thank you for your kind words. Ευχαριστώ πολύ. And on the occasion, I want to thank Frank Sbabe for his kind words and the wishes expressed earlier. And now, on behalf of the United European Left, this is Laura Castel.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, we would like to warmly congratulate the incoming President and, of course, to give thanks to the outgoing President, Mr. Cox, for being really brave in making difficult decisions during this difficult term. Thanks, dear Tini, from the bottom of our heart. Dear colleagues, in the dark times we are living, the Council of Europe has to deal with several violations of human rights, and this organization should raise his voice against them. I speak on behalf of my group to remind some of those we do not have to forget. The first one is the silence of some bodies of this Council of Europe on Gaza situation. In the Assembly, we will have the opportunity to debate on this tomorrow, but as a human rights organization, we need to focus not in the self-defense right, but on the children's massive killings and how the civilians are weaponized, destroying not only lives, but also the international multilateral system, and by doing this, destroying the trust in humanity. With no ceasefire, we have nothing. The second issue we want to highlight is the outrageous situation of political prisoner Julian Assange. On 21st of February, British courts will decide whether Mr. Assange can be extradited to the United States. It is what is called a permissions hearing, but we have not to deal with it as a legalistic process. Instead, we have to recognize that the British rule of law is on trial, and this is a human rights case where the political prisoner has been in maximum security prison for almost 5 years without conviction. It is happening in the soil of the Council of Europe, and we could do more. The third issue, colleagues, is a recurring topic, and for this reason is worrisome, is the non-implementation of judgments. Just a quick reminder, there is the case of Kavala, Demirtas, Öcalan, but those examples are of just one member state. But there are more. So, colleagues, we need to solve how to deal with those violations of the obligations which, as a member state, they have to honor. Without justice, we have no rights, and therefore, nothing. Of course, we have not forget the victims of Ukraine. We don't, for 2 years from now. Our group firmly believes that there will be no solution but dialogue, dialogue, and dialogue as the mechanism to find a way out of this conflict. Lastly, before commenting the Serbia elections, we think that the Council of Europe should say something on Yemen situation. They are using Cyprus, that is to say, Council of Europe soil, as the base for bombing civilians. All those examples show how dark days we are living and how work we have already to do. People are dying, children are dying, hour after hour, and we are sitting here with the responsibility to point out and find solutions, parliamentary solutions. So I have no time to comment the Serbia elections, but of course, Mr. Schener have done a very good report, so I finish here. Thank you, colleagues, and good luck for our president.
Thank you, Mrs. Castel. Thank you, dear Laura, for your wishes. And now, in the debate, I call next Mrs. Dunja Simonovic-Bratic. 3 minutes.
Dear colleagues, I must admit that I'm really moved and touched by such interest from MPs from PACE and from MPs from European Parliament that gave us such attention, although they have in their own countries very hot atmosphere, even if it's cold weather. Elections in Serbia are finished. We all know the results. Nearly 6,000 observers were hosted in the Republic of Serbia, but not on Kosovo and Metohija. That was not the problem, and no one seems to be occupied with that fact. Regime in Pristina didn't allow to organize elections. All Serbian people had to migrate to other cities to fulfill their right to take part in the elections. ODIHR, OSCE, European Parliament, PACE had a mandate to observe, not local, but republic elections. Those colleagues who urges this debate had no mandate for their claims now, and furthermore, they didn't complain in the observers' minutes from the polling stations which they signed. They gave their signature. After a few hours, when they realized that there is no win situation for their friends from the opposition in Belgrade, they started to complain. This is the violation of the conducting code of the ODIHR observers. So you were there, you signed it, with no objection. But until your concerns for my countries are still high, I will ask you to pay attention for something that is going to happen tomorrow within these walls. Tomorrow you will host so-called President of Assembly of the so-called Republic of Kosovo without any previous agenda on the political committee. I expect that you will ask him about elections, about violation of the international law, UN Charter, UN Resolution 1244, even Brussels agreements. When will they start to respect Serbian rights? This debate, unfortunately, is just an example of the attention diversion for the subject of armament of Kosovo with American missiles, abolition of payment transactions, appropriation of Orthodox churches, arresting people on false charges. The very same people who talks about the irregularities of the elections in Serbia are the strong supporters for the Kosovo independence and furthermore for giving them a membership in this organization. If there is a place in Europe where human rights died and deeply buried, that is a territory of false state Kosovo. And now we are listening about irregularities in Serbia elections process, even before you have seen the report from ODIHR. Where is the report? Well, it is not finished yet, and the observers from PACE are just a small part of the International Observers Mission. But you can't wait. Why? Because you have deadlines for your agenda for the false state Kosovo. That's why you are in such a hurry. Members of the Socialist Party of Serbia wishes you all the best on your elections. Thank you.
Thank you. And I call now Mr. Zsolt Nemet.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, first of all about Serbian elections, I would like to agree with our rapporteur who said that there have been irregularities in the elections, but these irregularities have been so-called normal irregularities. I think it is important to all of us to mediate the message to our Serbian colleagues that we regard the elections as legitimate elections. And as far as the party political interpretations are concerned, I hope that we stop questioning elections just because the winners are from the opposite political side. Secondly, we are after a 2-year political cycle, and it is not just the presidents who argue, but the chairs of the committees. It is a good time for stock-taking. I would like to express my gratitude to everybody who have cooperated inside the Political Affairs Committee and with the Political Affairs Committee in the past 2 years as the former chair of the Political Affairs Committee. And I would like to express my gratitude to all the other committee chairs. I think that with the coordination of the President, Mr. Tini Cox, we had a really good teamwork behind us. I am quite proud for the past 2 years' results. I would like to mention some positive elements. One, obviously, is the fourth summit, as we have described it as the kind of soul of Europe, role of the Council of Europe has been reinstated. I would also underline the importance dialogue what we had with the Russian and the Belarus opposition. I would also like to underline the importance that we have been able to maintain some basic human and minority rights standards inside the Ukraine, especially with the help of the Venice Commission. Negatives. Obviously, the Russia-Ukraine war is something, a big burden on our shoulder. And the 7th of October Hamas attack on Israel and the reoccurring anti-Semitism in Europe is reflecting that we have a lot to do. These are ugly scars on the face of Europe. Mr. Rosopoulos, I would like to welcome your election, your words that our weapons are not bullets, and that you are working for an agora in this organization. The 75th anniversary of the Council of Europe hopefully will be giving a new impetus to the European integration project to make Europe really whole and free for the sake of Europe and for our international partners as well. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, for your attention.
Mr. Nemeth, dear Zsolt, thank you so much for your kind words and wishes. I call now Rafael Husseinov for 3 minutes.
Thank you, President. Dear colleagues, the new year starts with special historical significance for the Council of Europe, and this year will mark the 75th anniversary of the Great Road. At such significant historical stage, it is necessary to look at both yesterday and tomorrow, be it in important presentations such as a progress report or in any decision taken on behalf of the Assembly. In human life, 75 years is the age of wisdom. For an organization, this age is a stage when every decision it makes is measured 100 times and taken once. At the end of the 20th century, this organization took an extremely right step by deciding to expand the Council of Europe to the South Caucasus. However, today, under the direct influence of certain forces, the policy pursued here against Azerbaijan causes both surprise, concern, and serious protest. Azerbaijan has solved the most complicated problem in its modern history and ended the occupation of 20% of its territory that lasted almost 30 years. It is strange that France, considered one of the main judges in resolving this conflict, as one of the members of the OSCE Minsk group, is today making the most serious attempt to rekindle the conflict that has ended. It constantly attempts to prevent the conclusion of a peace agreement, does not hide his initiatives to arm Armenia, and declares these initiatives at the state level, and not only through words, but also through concrete steps. Today, those who are inclined to accuse Azerbaijan of avoiding cooperation with the Council of Europe by using unfounded excuses are well aware that the real reason is not this, but something else. Behind this outward vision lies inability to digest the Karabakh victory of Azerbaijan. It is France that most zealously follow this line. Dear colleagues, those who attempt to impose any restriction on the delegation through violation of the procedures and established rules in this organization, those who are essentially acting against Azerbaijan should not forget an important historical truth. In January 1990, military units of the Soviet army attacked Azerbaijan and committed massacres. The goal was to intimidate the people of Azerbaijan and put an end to their struggle for freedom and sovereignty once and for all. The result turned out to be the opposite, and the collapse of the USSR began with the Kremlin's attack on Baku. We would never want the Council of Europe, which we have been effectively cooperating with, to suffer the same bitter fate as a result of biased attacks launched against Azerbaijan at the instigation of certain forces. While it is necessary to find new ways to make the Council of Europe stronger, it is not at all desirable to divide the organization from within and pose threats to its future. Dear colleagues, all secret and open affairs are clearly visible from outside, and we know very well which winds are blowing from where. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Husseinov. And now I call Mr. Pierre-Alain Frides. Pierre-Alain.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Tout d'abord, toutes mes félicitations pour votre nomination. J'ai eu l'occasion de participer à la mission d'observation des élections parlementaires en Serbie en décembre dernier. Et la première chose qui m'a interpellé, c'est que les élections parlementaires anticipées semblent être devenues une sorte de sport national. En effet, les dissolutions se suivent de manière très accélérée. Dissoudre un Parlement représente une pratique en soi tout à fait légale, mais une dissolution entrave le travail parlementaire qui, outre le contrôle des institutions, consiste à améliorer la législation et traduire dans les faits les réformes nécessaires d'un pays. La durée légale d'une législature est censée offrir aux commissions parlementaires et aux partis politiques le temps nécessaire pour travailler sereinement et en profondeur afin d'élaborer des textes aboutis et efficaces. Et surtout, pourquoi convoquer des élections parlementaires anticipées alors que la coalition au pouvoir, dont est issu le président, disposait d'une solide majorité? Tout cela suggère au mieux un calcul politique pour faire perdurer un pouvoir en place en tenant compte que la décision subite d'une dissolution offre en soi un avantage indéniable à la coalition gouvernementale en place, l'opposition ne disposant pas du temps nécessaire pour s'organiser. Les élections sont un temps fort dans la vie politique d'un pays démocratique et les règles absolues de l'égalité des chances, du respect de la liberté d'expression, d'un accès comparable, libre et sans pression aux médias, d'une neutralité absolue des services de l'État représentent des éléments essentiels pour la tenue d'élections libres, concurrentielles et respectueuses de l'État de droit. Dès l'annonce des résultats, des citoyens serbes en grand nombre sont descendus dans la rue dénonçant fraude et irrégularités. Diverses critiques ont été recensées. Des pressions sur des électeurs, notamment dans le secteur public, des allégations d'achat de vote, des pressions sur les médias avec des intimidations et une grande passivité de l'autorité de régulation des médias. Et surtout des allégations sérieuses comme quoi des électeurs de Bosnie auraient été déplacés par car jusqu'à Belgrade pour voter. Lors de mon observation, je n'ai personnellement rien constaté de spectaculaire, mais j'ai été étonné de constater que tous les électeurs ne semblaient pas être traités de la même manière. Dans certains quartiers, les bureaux de vote étaient bondés, avec une attente interminable pour arriver enfin dans un local de vote exigu et sans isoloir digne de ce nom, de quoi décourager les électeurs d'effectuer leur devoir électoral, alors que dans d'autres quartiers, une fluidité du vote dans des conditions parfaites. Et que dire des personnes devant certains bureaux de vote qui semblaient, pour le moins, tenter d'impressionner les électeurs. Dernière remarque d'importance, des moyens étatiques auraient été fortement engagés dans la campagne, à l'image du président du pays, normalement président de tous les Serbes, et qui, à cette occasion, bien que non candidat, a fonctionné comme l'équivalent d'un chef de parti en photo dans tout le pays aux côtés des candidats de la majorité sortante. Chers collègues, les électeurs serbes ont été confrontés à un vrai choix, mais en définitive, différents détails, dont certains importants, devaient prémunir le pays d'un éventuel chamboulement électoral. Merci pour votre attention.
Thank you so much, Pierre-Alain. La parole est maintenant à Madame Marie-Christine Dalloz.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Félicitations, Monsieur le Président Rossopoulos, pour votre élection. Vous serez le président du 75e anniversaire du Conseil et vos propos de ce matin attestent de votre volonté d'être à l'écoute de toutes et de tous. Et c'est important. Je voudrais bien sûr adresser mes sincères remerciements également au président Tini Cox, qui a su faire face à des situations difficiles au sein de notre institution. Son ouverture d'esprit et sa détermination ont permis à l'Assemblée parlementaire du Conseil de l'Europe de garder le cap, de faire évoluer les droits, tous les droits, et notamment ceux de toutes les victimes, et notamment des victimes de la guerre d'agression en Ukraine. Je voudrais, suite au rapport d'activité du Bureau, aborder un sujet qui n'est pas souvent traité dans notre enceinte, mais qui me semble important de prouver à tous les États membres qui contribuent à notre institution, c'est notre capacité à gérer les fonds publics qui nous sont confiés, puisque je rappelle à nos collègues que ce sont les États membres qui financent notre institution. Je crois qu'il y a, et je voudrais le dire aujourd'hui assez solennellement, il y a deux sujets qui m'interpellent. J'avais déjà, je crois, exprimé ça devant le bureau, mais je préfère que tous les collègues l'entendent. Premièrement, sur les réunions du bureau. Jusqu'à maintenant, notre institution tenait 4 réunions de bureau, bien évidemment, à Strasbourg, et 2 réunions décentralisées dans le principe de la présidence tournante. Ça faisait 6. Quand vous regardez un petit peu ces 2 dernières années, Monsieur le Président, et notamment l'année dernière, on a fait énormément de réunions de bureau à l'extérieur. Il y a eu 4 réunions de bureau à l'extérieur, et je pense qu'il y a un coût important de tout le déplacement du staff au niveau de la délégation du bureau. C'est première remarque. La deuxième remarque, si on veut être attentif sur la gestion des deniers publics, c'est les missions d'observation des élections. Elles sont nécessaires, fondamentales. Mais j'ai connu une époque où on faisait une mission d'observation des élections. Dorénavant, on fait systématiquement une préélectorale, comme le pratiquait l'OCDE. Je pense qu'il y a des pays où on pourrait s'épargner les missions préélectorales parce que c'est sur le budget, c'est financé directement sur le budget du Conseil de l'Europe, pas par les délégations de chaque pays. Et je pense que c'est un sujet sur lequel il faudra dorénavant se pencher pour avoir une gestion rigoureuse et qui permette de donner confiance aussi à notre capacité à gérer correctement les fonds confiés. Merci.
Merci, Marie-Christine. Merci beaucoup pour vos mots et vos gentils mots. Thank you so much. Thank you. And now we come to Mr. Busak Novakovic.
Distinguished President, dear colleagues, before I say any word about this report on observation of election in Serbia, I would like to remind you of two very important tasks that we have undertaken as parliamentarians. First is to maintain accountability for the outcomes of our work, and second, to preserve the relevance of the words that we are saying or writing, because the reputation, influence, and relevance of our parliaments, including this space, is and should be based on the true and the positive results of our work. For the mentioned reason, I think that official materials of this Assembly should not contain statements based on partial and incorrect allegation, but only on accurate and relevant data. Precisely, I'm referring to the paragraph 101 of this report, where it stated, I'm quoting, "The PACE delegation were informed about credible allegation of vote manipulation, including voter migration, especially citizens from Republika Srpska of Bosnia and Herzegovina, including Serbia's citizenship and phantom voters, which have triggered post-electoral protests. The mentioned allegations are not credible simply because they are not true, and their inclusion in this report is needless and incorrect. It is important to note that the participation of citizens living abroad in elections is widely accepted practice in many European countries in the Balkan, and seems that practice is acceptable anywhere except Serbia. Leaders of group of parties named Serbia Against Violence asserted that over 40,000 voters were illegally brought to Belgrade for voting from Bosnia and Herzegovina, but the fact is that number of eligible voters in 2023 Belgrade elections increased for only 13,000 voters, or 0.81%, comparing 2022 Belgrade elections. The second very important fact is also that on election day, only 20,368 individuals in total entered from Bosnia and Herzegovina into Serbia, many for travel and business purposes, many not even with citizenship of Serbia, many of them children, further refuting the claim of illegal voter transportation. This data categorically refutes any allegation stated even in this report, raising the question about their intentions. It is true that a group of opposition parties started protests with a goal to annul the entire electoral process in Belgrade, but their or anyone's election results or anyone's preferences should not be the basis for the spreading lies and even hatred towards citizens who have dual citizenship and the right to vote in line with electoral legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Bursak. And now I call Mr. Oleksiy Goncharenko.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to start with something I would never believe in 2 years ago, that I would say, thank you, President Cox, for excellent job done. Thank you very much. As well as probably you would never believe that you will be the president of PACE who finally kicked out Russia from this organization. And also, I would like to congratulate President Rosopoulos. I had an honor to work with you as a president of Migration Committee, as your vice president, and I wish you the best as a president of PACE. But I want to tell you what will be on your plate, and that is a very hard piece. It is a war. The main thing which you will deal next 2 years, and all of us should deal with. The war is in Europe already. It's not at the gates. It's already at my home. But if you will not react, if you will not act, it will come to your homes. Yesterday, I spoke with one ambassador to Council of Europe from member states, and she told me, I think my country would surrender if it would be attacked. I was terrified to hear this. Today, my friend, our colleague from Western European country told me, yeah, Russia is very bad, but they are not a direct threat to my country. It's a huge mistake. Russia is a direct threat to all of us. How simply and easily we forgot that just 35 years ago, half of Germany was occupied by Russia. Half of Germany. Don't forget this, please. Today, I have a bad news for you. Today, Russia is more dangerous than it was 2 years ago. Russian economy is on war footage. Russian army is battle-hardened. Russia doesn't care anymore about international obligations and anything else. They're not going to stop. If they would have any success in Ukraine, they would attack again and again and again. And what is happening at this time in Europe? Somebody is blocking our borders. Other, like Hungarian or Slovakian Prime Minister, is saying, let's give to Putin part of Ukraine, and he will be calm. Let's give to Maniac one woman, and he will be calm. Do you believe in this? Tyrants, they are like geopolitical maniacs. They can't stop. They only can be stopped. When Russia is preparing itself for bigger war, we are preparing ourselves for bigger Eurovision. When Russia is preparing more munition, we are preparing green transition. That's all important, but we need to produce munition, artillery. We need to fight. We need to be strong enough. That's the only language which will save us, the only way to save us. Today is the day of Ukrainian unity, a holiday in my country. And I want to tell you, you hear maybe from some media now that there are some political divisions in Ukraine. I want to tell you the most important thing. We are absolutely united in Ukraine around one idea. We need to win if we want to live. As simple as that. And that should be the idea of the whole Europe today. And by this, we will win. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you for your kind words. And yes, we are united on that. Yes, we know that this is a war, and of course you're right on what you already mentioned. Once again, thank you. And now we're going to Mr. Josip Mijatovic.
Geehrter Herr Präsident, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, wenn nur eine Stimme unberechtigt gezählt wurde, müssen diese Wahlen umgehend wiederholt werden. Dies, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, sind nicht meine Worte. Dies sind die Worte des serbischen Präsidenten Aleksandar Vučić bei einer Wahl vor 12 Jahren. Wahlen haben klare Spielregeln, die den Wettbewerb um die besten Ideen und Argumente fördern und den Willen der Bürger frei und unabhängig zum Ausdruck bringen. Und diese Spielregeln wurden in Serbien von dem Staatspräsidenten, der nicht einmal zur Wahl stand, auf brutalste mit Füßen getreten. Es handelt sich um einen Staatsoberhaupt, das die Demokratie in Serbien de facto abgeschafft hat. In panischer Angst vor Tausenden aufgebrachten Menschen in Serbien, die seit Monaten unter größtem Opfer und Repressalien seitens eines der an Brutalität nicht zu überbietenden Regimes für Freiheit und Demokratie kämpfen, versuchte er mit vorgezogenen Wahlen seine Haut zu retten. Obwohl seine Person nicht zur Wahl stand, hat er die Wahlprozesse auf eine an Frechheit nicht zu überbietende Weise inszeniert und manipuliert. Kolleginnen und Kollegen, heute geht es nicht nur um die Zukunft der Demokratie Serbiens, sondern vor allem auch um die Glaubwürdigkeit der Demokraten in Europa und unsere eigene Glaubwürdigkeit. Unregelmäßigkeit bei Wahlen zu ignorieren, wegzuschauen, dass Demokratinnen und Demokraten seit Monaten in Serbien unter staatlichen Repressalien für ihre demokratischen Rechte kämpfen, schadet unserer Glaubwürdigkeit. Unsere schwer erkämpften Menschenrechte, genauso wie unsere Sicherheit, werden nicht nur in der EU verteidigt, sondern vor allem auch in Serbien. Die auf allen Ebenen festgestellten massiven Mängel und Verstöße gegen die demokratische Grundordnung in Serbien sind zu keinem Zeitpunkt zu akzeptieren. Daher ist es unabdingbar, dass wir erstens auf die Vorwürfe der Wahlbeobachter umgehend reagieren und von Serbien eine sofortige Aufklärung der Unstimmigkeiten verlangen. Zweitens, Zugang zu den Wählerlisten ermöglichen, Bereinigung mit Hilfe der internationalen Expertengruppe vollziehen und schnellstmögliche Wiederholung der Wahlen auf den Weg bringen. Und drittens, bis zur Wiederholung der Wahlen unter fairen Bedingungen die politisch Verantwortlichen mit allen uns zur Verfügung stehenden Sanktionen zum raschen Handeln zu bewegen. Kolleginnen und Kollegen, das ist das Mindeste, was wir den Demokratinnen und Demokraten in Serbien, die um ihre und unsere Grundrechte kämpfen, schulden. Vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit.
Thank you so much. Now, Mrs. Biljana Pandic-Pilza.
Your speech seems to have been written by the Serbian opposition, and you obviously have a problem with almost 3 million people who support our president, Aleksandar Vučić, but that is not the topic today. Ladies and gentlemen, elections are the only democratic form of trust or distrust in political parties. The dynamic of holding election in all countries depends solely on the dynamic of political circumstances in each individual level, that is why I could not agree with Mr. Šenach's assessment that early elections create an unlevel playing field and political instrumentalization of the electoral process, and that is undermines public trust in democratic institutions and the electoral process. I will remind you that the early parliamentary and local elections in Serbia were organized at the request of the opposition parties, who specifically request that the election be held by the end of 2023. What I can agree with is that terminating parliamentary mandates ahead of time also prevents parliaments from working properly, preparing thorough and inclusive legislation and holding the executive to account, which is key in a parliamentary democracy. But I will repeat one more. These elections were held at the request of the parliamentary opposition parties. As stated in the International Observer Statement after the elections in Serbia, the election administration prepared for voting day efficiently and transparently, considering the challenges posed by the short timeline and the local and regional election taking place the same day. The elections in Serbia, including those for the Belgrade City Assembly, have been among the most rigorously monitored in the national history. A total of 5,587 observers monitored the parliamentary elections. The IEOM positively assessed the voting process in 93% of the 1,220 polling stations observed. Negative assessment were primarily attributed to overcrowding and inadequate measures to ensure secret of the vote. This figure represents a small fraction of the total number of polling stations, indicating that these serious irregularities were not widespread. I would like to point out that Mr. Šenach observed elections at 2 polling stations in Sremska Mitrovica and Vračar municipality. In the observed minutes from both polling stations, which Mr. Šenach personally signed, no irregularities or remarks were documented. Yet, he made media statement contradicting his signed observed minutes, additionally contravening the code of conduct, claiming to have witnessed incident he did not document officially. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Alors, notre dernière oratrice sera Madame Mireille Clapeau.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Félicitations d'ailleurs à vous, Monsieur le Président Rassopoulos, et hommage à Thierry Cox qui a fait rayonner notre institution. Je tiens avant tout à saluer le travail de notre bureau et de notre commission permanente. J'ai eu la chance d'y participer en me rendant à Vaduz le 28 novembre et de prendre part à ce travail essentiel pour la préparation et le suivi de nos missions parlementaires. À cette occasion, j'ai présenté le rapport de la mission d'observation électorale que j'ai menée en Pologne en octobre. Je me félicite de son approbation et suis ravie de voir que le processus électoral compétitif qui a eu lieu a pu être mené à son terme avec l'élection du nouveau Premier ministre Donald Tusk, puis la nomination de son gouvernement. Il est heureux de voir que l'alternance décidée par les Polonais ait pu se faire dans le respect des règles et des institutions, alors que le pouvoir en place avait abusé des ressources publiques et bénéficié de la partialité des médias publics. Je profite d'ailleurs de ce moment pour souhaiter la bienvenue à nos nouveaux collègues polonais et d'ailleurs à tous nos nouveaux collègues. Un mot des élections qui ont eu lieu en Serbie dans un contexte tendu. La mission d'observation de l'APCE menée conjointement avec celle du Parlement européen et de l'OSCE a constaté certes une organisation efficace, mais émis des doutes. Le jour des élections, les observateurs ont constaté des intimidations et des pressions exercées contre les électeurs. Cela jette un voile sur la transparence de l'élection de ce pays, alors que cette transparence est essentielle pour la démocratie et pour l'Europe. Monsieur le rapporteur, je vous remercie pour votre exposé sur l'importance de ces cas d'irrégularité et le rôle qu'ils auraient pu jouer sur la régularité du scrutin final. Par ailleurs, vous avez dénoncé l'implication décisive du président, les avantages systémiques du parti au pouvoir, ainsi que les mauvais traitements de militants, défenseurs des droits humains et des journalistes. Je note également votre inquiétude quant au risque de manipulation de l'information, en particulier dans le contexte de la guerre en Ukraine déclenchée par la Russie et qui peut avoir des résonances en Serbie. Permettez-moi un mot personnel. J'ai constaté en Turquie, où j'étais observatrice, puis en Pologne, où j'étais chef de mission, que les missions préélectorales permettent d'effectuer des observations plus pointues et que le rapport qui est issu de cette première phase donne le temps aux commissions électorales et à l'administration de rectifier le tir. Alors sans doute faut-il réformer pour prendre en compte nos obligations, en particulier financières, mais se rendre 2 fois sur place, une fois avant l'élection et une fois le jour de l'élection, me semble incontournable. Merci de votre attention.
Merci, Madame Clapeau. Dear colleagues, I must now interrupt the list of speakers. The speeches of members on the speakers list who have been presented during the debate but have not been able to speak may be given to the table office for publication in the official report. I remind colleagues that the texts are to be submitted in typescript, electronically if possible, no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers is interrupted. Now, Mr. Cox, do you wish to reply? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much for the well-meant compliments, both from in your direction as the new president and some nice words with regard to the outgoing president. I think we have shown that presidents come and go, the presidency stays, and I welcome it very much that we try to stick to the procedures that we have developed before my predecessor in the past 2 years and in the coming times. We need a very solid presidency, as we need our political groups and our committees, as was mentioned by amongst them Zolte Zemet, that if our political groups and our committees function, then the organization as such, the Assembly first and foremost, does what it has to do. One final remark, as Alexei Goncharenko said, yes, we do have our differences in this Assembly, and we do have our differences in our national parliaments, and nothing wrong about that. It would be weird if we would have national parliaments which agree on everything. That doesn't make sense. And it's not a problem at all that also in this assembly we differ on opinions, but especially that we do not focus too much on differences, which should be mentioned, but in the end we should look in the idea, as was also mentioned by our president, in the end we should consider this assembly as an agora where you, while respecting the differences, we see whether we can come to a joint conclusion. And I think Alexei mentioned that with regard to Ukraine. We decided that there was no other fair option than to say we now have to end the membership of Russia in this organization, a blatant violation of international law, a blatant violation of sovereignty and integrity of a member state. We cannot say then to say, sorry, here it ends. So I am proud, and I refer to what Alexei also said. We did agree that we had to take this decision, and we did take it with unanimity, and I think that was important. I wish all the best to the president for new decisions to be taken. They will be there, and I'm put full trust in our new president that when it's really needed, we will take as unanimous as possible our decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, dear Tinian, for your kind words, and of course the deep appreciation you have heard today from this assembly makes my job much more difficult. I'll try to fulfill the criteria that you have already implemented. Thank you so much once again. Dear colleagues, the Bureau has proposed references and transmissions to committees and the modification of a reference for ratification by the Assembly. They are set out in document 15885 and addendum 1. Is there any objection to the proposed references to committees? So, I now propose that the other decisions in the progress report, document 15885, be ratified. Are there any objections? No, there are no objections. The progress report is approved. We will now hear the presentation of Mrs. Dunja Mijatovic, Council of the Europe Commissioner for Human Rights, on her annual activity report 2023. After her address, Mrs. Mijatovic will take questions from the floor. I must inform the Assembly that this will be her final address until her mandate as Commissioner, and I express the thanks of all the Assembly for her dedicated work during her term of office. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, as I told you, I have the pleasure of welcoming the Commissioner for Human Rights of the Council of Europe, Mrs. Mijatovic. Madam Commissioner, 2023 was again a very active year for you, notably with visits of Armenia and Azerbaijan, but also Denmark, Germany, or Italy, for example. Your work, Madam Commissioner, is essential in awakening consciences on human rights abuses and sounding the alarm in whatever country that they happen. I do not want to take too much time over your presentation and the exchange of views, so I'll stop here. I really look forward to your intervention. Madam Commissioner, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, esteemed members of the Parliamentary Assembly. First of all, I would like to sincerely congratulate you for the appointment, and I'm also very honored to have a previous president here in this hall. Yes, the time has come, and I stand today before you to present my final annual report as Commissioner for Human Rights. I think it is important, even though I think it's known, that I feel a profound sense of honor, responsibility, And this tenure, this mandate has been, and it is still for a few more months, a privilege to serve at the helm of this unique institution, championing the cause of human rights in times of great change and challenge, when democracy and human rights have been put under enormous stress and often undermined. When I started my mandate, some of those changes and challenges already existed, but were of different nature and, of course, called for a very different action. 6 years ago, issues like misinformation, surveillance were already important, but the rapid advancement in technology since then, including artificial intelligence, such as deepfakes and more sophisticated social media algorithms, have amplified these enormous challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound impact on human rights and democratic governance. Emergency measures, in some cases, have compromised democratic freedoms and principles and human rights. And if the sanitary emergency is over, the disparities it exacerbated persist, disproportionately affecting vulnerable populations. Moreover, the nature and focus of social and political movements have also evolved. Issues like climate change, social justice, and economic inequality have become more prominent, and their intersection with human rights and democracy is different compared to 6 years ago, with greater emphasis placed on inclusive and participatory approaches. This period, I would say, has not only tested the mandate of the Commissioner for Human Rights, but also our ability to act rapidly and adapt to unforeseeable situations, but has also underscored the vital importance of our collective commitment to upholding the dignity and rights of all individuals at any time and in any situation. Arguably, the most harrowing illustration of this has been Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. For nearly 2 years, this conflict has caused violations of human rights and international humanitarian law of a staggering scale. The long-term impact of this are profound, extending beyond immediate physical and material needs to the psychological and social well-being of entire communities for years to come. In my visits to Ukraine, I was struck by the magnitude of the human suffering, but also by the resilience of the Ukrainian people. Despite the horrors they have faced, their spirit of resistance and determination are admirable, and a call for action by the international community. After my last visit to Ukraine, I called for urgent action and international cooperation to ensure the return of Ukrainian children separated from their families and legal guardians. In this connection, I would first like to acknowledge the crucial role played by organizations and networks of human rights defenders and civil societies in Ukraine and in Russia in facilitating the returns of Ukrainian children. Much of this work is fraught with difficulty, and it is often done at considerable personal risk to those involved. I will also wish to welcome the Ukrainian Ombudsman's Office role in providing support to the children, but also their families. Without the determination and commitment of all those involved, it would be impossible to navigate the long and winding road to returning the children. But as I said on many occasions, I will repeat here, the clock is ticking. However, many more children are missing, and their return must continue to be a priority for the international community and at the same time for this organization. Another issue I focused on during my last visit to Ukraine was the situation of Crimean Tatars In my report, I highlighted serious and overlooked human rights violations such as arbitrary arrests, detentions, enforced disappearances, harassment, misuse of anti-extremism laws, forced conscription, and illegal transfers of detainees to Russia. Unfortunately, Russia's war in Ukraine and the illegal annexation of Crimea were not the only conflicts that caused suffering in Europe. Human rights violations have also marked the latest and, hopefully, the last chapter of the long conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan in and around the Karabakh region in 2023. Just a few days ago, I published observations following a visit to Armenia and Azerbaijan, including the Karabakh region of Azerbaijan. It was the first time in decades that a human rights mission of this kind was able to visit the Karabakh region. I stress that effective human rights protection of all persons affected by the conflict over the Karabakh region is key to the success of the peace process. Beyond the human rights situation in war and conflict zones, there are still other remarkable challenges that need to be better addressed. The first and probably most worrying, given its impact on human rights protection in general, is the erosion of the rule of law. And here I would like to mention several issues that I find of extreme importance for the future of our democracies, for the future of this organization. The rule of law is one of the civilization's greatest achievements and an essential antidote to the scourge of tyranny and oppression. The rule of law, together with democracy and human rights, is the bedrock of our organization and our societies. Regrettably, this antidote is currently being diluted in an increasing number of our member states, where governments ignore court rulings, including of our court, hamper the independence and impartiality of the judiciary, exert pressure on individual judges, reduce parliaments to mere formalities, hold national human rights structures captive, and dominate media. At the heart of this crisis is a belief that exists that elected officials have greater legitimacy than those charged with upholding the rule of law. This belief is false and dangerously misleading. On the contrary, it is the responsibility of political leaders to uphold, strengthen, and respect the independence, impartiality, and effectiveness of the judiciary. In few areas is this erosion of the rule of law more visible than in the approach to migration management. Pushbacks, inadequate responses to tragedies at sea, inhuman reception conditions, and restrictive family reunification policies are unfortunately not new. But the check and balances and adherence to fundamental rules that used to provide a measure of protection against these phenomena, including respect for international and domestic court decisions, are less and less visible and effective. And this should worry all of us. The resulting levels of tolerance to serious human rights violations against refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants that are taking root across Europe are deeply alarming. The increasing focus on externalization of asylum processes, whereby some states shift their responsibility in this field across border, encourages others to do the same, with the risk of creating a domino effect that could undermine the European and global system of international protection. This race to the bottom, driven by political instrumentalization of migration for electoral gain, and the dehumanization of those seeking refugee, highlights a disconnect with the universality of human rights and states' obligations to apply human rights law. This erosion goes far beyond the immediate suffering of these individuals. It undermines confidence in international agreements and cooperation, weakening our collective ability to address global challenges. It has been proven many times that adopting populist positions only benefits populists. Adaptation strategies do not reduce support for populists. Increasing hostility towards human rights is a related phenomenon. This growing sentiment, driven by widespread frustration, uncertainty, and ingrained inequalities, is creating a divide. It is distancing people from the very rights that are in place to safeguard them. The consequences of this shift are far-reaching and concrete, affecting the lives of millions. I say this not as an abstract concern, but based on what I have seen and heard during my visits in numerous talks with affected people. One of the groups of people most concerned by this situation are women. Violence, pervasive misogynist rhetoric are symptoms of deeply rooted gender inequalities that persistently afflicts our societies. Across Europe, women face substantial barriers to the full exercise of their rights, including their sexual and reproductive health rights. On this issue, I will publish a document by the end of February following up on the issue paper published by my predecessor on sexual and reproductive health and rights in 2017. Further, exacerbating these challenges are the deliberate actions of anti-gender movements. Using misleading narratives, these groups work to undermine women's rights and stop progress towards gender equality. Their efforts reinforce damaging stereotypes, casting a detrimental influence over the societal roles of both women and men. Another alarming example of our current challenges is the intense and widespread intolerance faced by LGBTI individuals. They encounter numerous threats that undermine their dignity, safety, and fundamental freedoms. The difficulties in obtaining legal gender recognition, the restrictions placed on their freedoms of assembly and associations, and inadequate protection afforded to them at public events are stark indicators of the failure to fulfill states' commitments and uphold legal obligations. The situation of transgender people is particularly worrying. For this reason, my office has been working for the past 2 years on a report on this issue that I will publish before the end of March. It is a lesson long overdue that we must remain vigilant against any form of othering and dehumanization. Globally, nations have established institutions with the aim to combating hatred, racism, and extremism. Yet, the persistence of anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim hatred, anti-Gypsyism, and other manifestations of racism and intolerance across Europe serves as a poignant reminder that our efforts have been only partially successful. In several member states, a range of initiatives are being pursued to foster interreligious dialogue and cultivate mutual respect. A particularly inspiring example, which I'm very happy to share with you today, is the upcoming launch of the Muslim-Jewish Peace and Remembrance Initiative at the Srebrenica Memorial Center in Potocari on 27th of January. This event presents a potent symbol of hope and demonstrates the collective desire to build a society where individuals from diverse backgrounds and beliefs come together, not in mere tolerance, but in shared commitment to trust, peace, and respect. Furthermore, I have focused my work on other deeply troubling issues. Of particular concern is the alarming deterioration in the safety and freedom of journalists and human rights defenders in several member states. They are increasingly subject to a range of serious reprisals, including judicial harassment, unfair prosecution, and physical harm. The prolonged detention of Osman Kavala, now in its 6th year, despite a ruling by the European Court of Human Rights and the decisions by the Committee of Ministers and the Council of Europe, is a glaring example. However, Kavala's case is not an isolated one. Numerous other human rights defenders, journalists, and civil society activists, such as Bakhtiar Hajiev, have been unjustly imprisoned for their legitimate and peaceful exercise of their human rights. This is compounded by the persistent problem of impunity for crimes against journalists in several member states. Lengthy investigations and frequent failure to bring the perpetrators to justice are common, as evidenced by the unsolved murders of Georgi Gongadze, Slavko Churuvia, Daphne Caruana Galizia, Jan Kuciak, Lyra McKee, and Georgos Karaivais, to name but just a few cases. And there are dozens and hundreds more. I would like to express my deepest admiration, now standing before you, but I know that I'm listened by the civil society, for the extraordinary courage and unwavering commitment of these journalists and human rights defenders. I once again urge the authorities of the member states to release all those imprisoned solely for their peaceful human rights activities and the exercise of their rights. It would be an act of courage and wisdom for the future. The practice of judicial harassment of these individuals must cease, and governments must refrain from discrediting them, a tactic that further endangers their lives. It is also imperative to prioritize the end of impunity. Crimes against journalists and human rights defenders must be promptly and impartially investigated, and the perpetrators and orchestrators brought to justice. Finally, it is crucial to support and protect independent journalists and human rights defenders in Russia and Belarus, as well as those in exile. They are essential defenders of democratic values and human rights. They must be recognized and supported in their essential work. The profound impact of the triple planetary crisis of environmental pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss on human rights stands out as another critical issue of our time. These are not mere environmental concerns. They pose existential threats that strike at the core of human rights, but also dignity. Regrettably, the responses of member states to these challenges are often woefully inadequate, a fact that becomes particularly evident in their handling of peaceful environmental protest. The employment of heavy-handed police tactics and the criminalization of peaceful activism not only contravenes democratic principles, but also violate fundamental rights to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. Allow me now to briefly turn the attention to a regional issue, which, through geographically confined, carries profound implications for countless Europeans. It challenges our collective ability to transition from a history marred by serious crimes to a future of peaceful, multicultural societies rooted in the human rights. Several countries from the region of the former Yugoslavia stand at a pivotal juncture. In my report, published 2 months ago on transition justice in the region, I emphasized the urgent need to involve victims in addressing the past, the urgent need to listen to them when addressing the past and breaking the cycle of intergenerational trauma, placing a particular emphasis on youth. These are critical steps on the path towards genuine healing and reconciliation. The final issue I wish to address is the pressing necessity for the stringent regulation of digital technologies, particularly AI. The unbridled advancement of AI presents formidable risks to an array of human rights and the very essence of our democratic fabric. We are constantly confronted with scenarios where AI could profoundly erode privacy, equality, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, among other rights, even considerably more than it is already capable of doing. The imperative for comprehensive regulations governing the development and application of AI cannot be emphasized enough. Member states of the Council of Europe are obligated to uphold human rights, a duty that includes crafting regulatory frameworks to protect individuals from rights violations perpetrated by either private entities or state actors. Despite the formidable challenges we face, it is essential to acknowledge the significant strides made in human rights implementation. Current challenges are daunting, but they should not deter us. Rather, they should invigorate us, our resolve to recommit to the principles and standards our organization upholds. I hold a steadfast belief in the feasibility of this endeavor. And in my view, it is not that human rights have failed. Rather, where gaps exist, it is largely due to our collective shortcomings in implementing these rights systematically and effectively across generations. State authorities, and notably you, as parliamentarians, are entrusted with a primary role in this endeavor. But leadership in this area demands more than just rhetoric. It requires politicians to set an example through both their words, but also their actions. And in this vein, bolstering multilateralism is critical for sustaining international cooperation, preserving global stability, and upholding democratic values. This is especially pertinent in the current year, a time when numerous elections will scrutinize the strength, resilience, and integrity of democratic processes amid challenges of digital misinformation and geopolitical tensions. Mr. President, esteemed members of PACE, even in the darkest moments of recent European history, such as Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the resilience of multilateralism and commitment to human rights has been evident. The collective response to this war, including humanitarian assistance, economic support, and legal efforts to hold the Russian authorities to account, has been an expression of our member states' continued commitment to cooperation and principled actions. The collective and united response to this war demonstrates the resilience of an international system that, despite its imperfections, remains our best defense against tyranny and the best defense of our rights. The recent Council of Europe summit held in Reykjavik, where the heads of states and government pledged to reaffirm their commitment to the norms and principles of this organization, is encouraging. Member states have agreed on a clear roadmap for strengthening human rights protection and to reinforce the Council of Europe and its institutions, including the Office of the Commissioner. Moreover, the dedication of NGOs, journalists, human rights defenders, and activists, including young environmental human rights defenders, often facing great personal risks, remind us that the principles and vision of our organization continue to inspire across generations and are as relevant today, I would say, as they were when the Council of Europe was created 75 years ago. Now, our mission is to leverage these positive trends to further the cause of human rights and also to narrow the divide between norms and reality. Last but not the least, you would allow me, because I want to address my team sitting there, I would like to express my deepest gratitude, I was not expecting this, to each and every member of my team, including the ones that moved to new professional challenges, for their commitment, dedication to human rights, and for their hard work. They have consistently demonstrated, first of all, which I think is important for this job, being commissioner or not, their passion, their drive, showing up with their best selves and also pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible. Their resilience and adaptability of possibility to turn and to change have been nothing short of remarkable. And it has been a real honor and a privilege to lead and also work along such remarkable individuals. And I thank you for the opportunity. The memories we have created, also the achievements and visits and talks with many people, people who suffer, And everything we accomplish together will forever hold a special place in my heart. Let us remember that the advancement of human rights is not a linear process, but a collective struggle that requires continuous effort of all of us. By promoting human rights awareness, advocating for justice, and working towards an inclusive society, we can build a future where human rights are respected, protected, and fulfilled for all. Thank you very much.
They say that the politicians do not have emotions. So in the rare times that the politicians show their emotions, simultaneously, in my opinion, they show how deep they are involved in what we say, serving the people. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Madam Mijatovic, for your most interesting address. Members of the Assembly have questions to put to you. I just want to remind them that the questions must be limited to 30 seconds and no more, so colleagues should be asking questions and not making speeches. The first question is on behalf of the Socialists, Greens and Democrats from Mrs. Petra Bayer.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Distinguished Mrs. Commissioner for Human Rights, dear Dunja, on behalf of my political group, I really want to thank you for your work you have done for human rights during the last years. You always have been and you will be a loud voice for human rights. You often acted outside the comfort zone, and I think that's an appropriate place for a human rights commissioner. Your term will end by March, and we will decide about your successor in the course of this week. And you, of course, you mentioned a couple of challenges. What do you think is the main challenge of your successor, and what qualifications should she or he bring to face and to overcome these challenges?
Yes, please.
Thank you, dear Petra. Now, when you know that I also have a soft spot, I think I can also use this opportunity to be more frank on certain issues related to the question that you just posed. Thank you for all the cooperation, all the work we did in the past years, also in relation to the preparation of the visit to your country, Austria, but also holding the torch when it comes to women's rights and gender equality so high, and making on so many occasions my work easier. When it comes to challenges for my successor, I think the road and the direction is quite clear. I mentioned several things that will not go away from the agenda, which is related to human rights of Ukrainian people, the issue related to the peace process with the roadmap, human rights roadmap, for Armenia and Azerbaijan, the Western Balkan in general. If you ask me about the regions, also many other member states, it's the job that actually cannot predict. You never know what is around the corner. If somebody told me I will have to deal with a pandemic, and just after that, on the way out of pandemic, we were faced with the consequences of the war. You need to be ready to react quickly. And this is what I mentioned in relation to my team. You need to be able to switch and to turn and to be able to address certain issues. The mandate is clear, it is broad, it is unique. You created something which I find extraordinarily important in the international fora when it comes to other human rights institutions and mandates. But when it comes to your question in relation to particular skills for my successor, I think the ball is in your corner, and you have to decide. You have three highly skilled individuals. but this is your job, and what I think when it comes to mandate, it is very clear what needs to be addressed, and how certain individuals will do this is really up to persons. If you look my predecessors, we are all different personalities, but we all hold human rights and the mandate and the importance of this job very high. So even though there are different priorities and different times, as I said, 6 years ago the situation was different. We do not know what is awaiting us, but we need to be ready.
Elisaveta Jasko from EPP.
On behalf of EPP, my question is as such. What do you recommend to your successor on the question of developing the mechanism of personal sanctions against those who commit crimes in human rights? I mean, talking now about that crimes that are committed by Russian Federation in Ukraine, but also in other countries. Thank you.
I don't think that's a question for me. I'm not decision maker when it comes to sanctions or how certain mandates will look like. For me, as a Commissioner for Human Rights, a matter of accountability, justice being served for war crimes or any crimes is absolutely essential. How certain sanctions will be applied to certain member states is for the governments and parliaments to decide. Commissioner's role is very clear. It is of democratic nature. Commissioner cannot sanction. The most powerful tool I have in my toolbox is my voice. That is how you make changes on one side. On the other side, there are other tools to do this. But when it comes to proposals on particular sanctions here on Russian Federation, I think this organization already sent a very clear message what needs to be done. The ICC, the organizations that have to take care of this, they made a very clear decisions and sent a very clear messages in relation to this. When it comes to the role and the mandate of the Commissioner, unfortunately, that is not an issue that is covered in any way in the mandate of the Commissioner.
Now it is the turn of Kamal Jafarov from the European Conservatives.
Commissioner, first of all, thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you very much for visiting our region and also meeting with the members of the Western Azerbaijan Committee. Even though there was a specific reference to one ethnic group in your report, but information regarding our meeting and also cause seemingly was deliberately left out. So my question is that, as a commissioner, could you outline how you ensured an impartial approach to all ethnic groups to maintain integrity to the human rights framework? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jafarov. I indeed received the letter. I'm sorry that you felt left from this, I would say, extremely moderate and balanced report trying to see a way forward in the peace process. I do not mention particular meetings with NGOs, or most of the time I mention that I met with the NGOs and activists without naming them. But what I think is important here, more than mention of your organization or any other, is the fact that I ask for the same rights for all. So in my report, as the government of Azerbaijan clearly stated, also disagreeing with certain issues that I said, which is nothing new, as Mr. Cox said, it would be impossible to see that we agree on everything. but it was clearly stated that certain issues that were never raised in relation to Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict were raised in this report. And I can assure you that there is any special plan or any reason for me including or not including certain issues. It is simply my decision as a commissioner to tackle issues of different nature, which I tackled in this report, from missing persons, demining, hate speech, enormous suffering of all. And many asked me, what did I see when I went to Karabakh? My first answer to this would be really, apart from some people that are returning, the IDPs, I saw no Armenians, no Azerbaijani, beautiful nature, and an urgent need for peace and reconciliation. And I will urge this House also to work in this direction, to stop the process of accusations and work on human rights for all people, regardless of their origin or ethnicity.
Mrs. Sabina Kudic, on behalf of ALDE.
The Liberals, but also in my personal capacity, I want to thank you for your incredible commitment, dedication, work, and grace that you brought to this position. May we live in interesting times. Of course, as a curse, you as a commissioner served in very interesting times, challenging times. And I want to give you an opportunity and wish to give you an opportunity to reflect for a second, and perhaps if you had a chance to choose one thing that you would wish to be part of your legacy and that this position would be remembered for in your mandate, to tell us, and what would be one advice that you would give to the upcoming commissioner in challenging times that continue to be more complex and more difficult with times. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabina. It's great to get a question from a person from your country. It makes it extremely honorable and important. There are many things that I would like to be my legacy, but being very honest and realistic person, whatever I touch, I know that my predecessors also worked on it. The new things are, of course, artificial intelligence and human rights as a sort of new portfolio. But that portfolio was somehow also pushed away because the priorities were constantly arriving and coming or popping out of the box. So you needed to sort of really drop everything and do certain things. And for me, when I say do certain things, to see where people suffer the most. And for us, it was really to be able to go to Ukraine immediately, to try to tackle issues that we can. So already in May, beginning of May 2022, we were in Bucha, Borodyanka, Irpin, talking to the victims and trying to tackle issues. The issue related to children, suggestions we made. Something that I'm very proud of is the work my team and myself did on reporting on human rights violations of Crimean Tatars, which I hope will continue to be a very important issue. Transitional justice, or dealing with the past of our region, which I think is something that I tackled prominently. And here I cannot not mention Srebrenica and mothers that came here in 2019 for the first time ever, where their voices were heard, and something I tried to work on but did not succeed. And I hope this will be a possibility for the future, not just for the Commissioner, but also for this whole, to work with the UN and to finally recognize 11th of July as a commemoration day for the whole world to remember. And this is for the future generations and for peace and reconciliation and nothing else. It would be partial justice, I would say, apart from judgments and everything that we already have. When it comes to my successor, I have many messages, but I think the main is do not give in, do not give up, do not let any side, left, right, up and down, or anywhere, get you into anything but on what you really, truly believe is just, and work with a team. That's the most important issue. Listen to the voices of human rights defenders and people that are actually still looking at this office as a place where they can raise their issues and potentially have some kind of solutions. But it was, and it is not an easy ride. It is extremely responsible mandate, and it is an opportunity of the lifetime. So you do it rightly or not. It really depends.
And now, on behalf of the United European Left, I call the co-president, Mr. Andrei Hunko.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kommissarin. Also, wait a moment. Okay, vielen Dank, Frau Kommissarin. Ich würde gerne noch mal auf die Situation von Julian Assange eingehen. Sie haben auf die Journalisten hingewiesen. Diese Versammlung hat zweimal seine sofortige Freilassung gefordert. Sie haben in Ihrer Eigenschaft als Kommissarin auch mit einem Brief an Priti Patel damals reagiert. Vielen Dank auch dafür. Jetzt steht am 20. und 21. Februar möglicherweise die letzte Anhörung in Großbritannien auf der Tagesordnung. Es ist fast 5 Jahre, dass er jetzt in einem Hochsicherheitstrakt, einer 6 Quadratmeter großen Zelle in Belmarsh sitzt. Was können wir tun, was noch in dieser Zeit, um Julian Assange zu schützen? Es droht wirklich sehr konkret die Auslieferung.
Thank you, Mr. Hunko. As you know, we had numerous discussions, not just two of us, but several other colleagues in relation to this case. I was very clear, as you rightly stated, in relation to this, that Julian Assange should not be extradited. I was public on this, also with my letter and to the UK authorities. It was May 22 to the Home Secretary, you already mentioned, and then also public statement, and also during my visit to United Kingdom. I am very much aware of the current situation. My team and myself are following closely. We know about the hearing that is set for 2021 February. But in relation to this, I think would be prejudging to say anything apart from what I already stated in relation to this case and the fact that he should not be extradited. But you know, as long as I'm in the office, I will continue following the case. And when it comes to the work and your question on what can be done, I think the Parliamentary Assembly and several colleagues are already doing quite a lot. We are also in touch with many NGOs that are closely following the trials and also some of them visiting Mr. Assange in prison.
So thank you. Since we're running out of time, I will give now the floor to 4 colleagues. They will ask their questions, and I would ask Madam Commissioner to answer as brief as he can. So Mr. Husseinov is the first.
Thank you. Dear Mr. Commissioner, the Khojaly tragedy is among the most terrible pages of the occupation policy pursued by Armenia against Azerbaijan for almost 30 years. The genocide committed in Khojaly in February 1992 is considered one of the most terrible crimes against humanity. During a trip to the region to prepare a report, you met with survivors of the Khojaly genocide, as well as with Azerbaijanis deported from their historical lands in Armenia in the late 1980s. Why was your opinion about this meeting not included in the text of your report? Thank you.
Mr. Gevorkyan.
Madam Commissioner, during your mandate, ethnic cleansings of Armenians took place in Nagorno-Karabakh. Azerbaijan has turned into a dynastic monarchy, violating its obligation towards the Council of Europe. Turkey and some other member states are ignoring the decisions of the Strasbourg Court. Do you see the problem of dysfunction of international institutions, including yours, given that the quality of democracy in member states has been declining in recent years and violations of fundamental human rights and freedoms are increasing? Thank you.
Mrs. Vodda, Tamara Vonda.
Yes. Dear Commissioner, in the shadow of armed conflict, intolerance towards certain groups is once again straightening. Discrimination of those groups is the subject of annual reports and progress is slow, as it in the case of the situation of the Roma. Our society is losing a generation of Roma children who have no opportunities for education, no opportunities for integration into the labour market, no opportunities for advancement of the social ladder, no opportunities to avoid the fact that being Roma already marks and determines them at birth. Dear Commissioner, is it possible to do even more within the framework of our activities and responsibilities? Thank you.
Thank you. And the last on the list is Mr. Millon.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Madame la Commissaire, je suis ici, juste en face de vous. J'ai écouté votre discours que j'ai trouvé très humaniste. J'ai écouté aussi les questions de nos collègues et je me pose une question à laquelle je souhaite que vous puissiez répondre. Y a-t-il encore en Europe un pays qui respecte intégralement les droits de l'homme ?
So thank you, dear colleagues. Madam Mijatovic, you have the floor to reply.
So the first question was from distinguished delegate from Azerbaijan on Khojaly. I mean, it's very similar answer to what I said to Mr. Jafarov. There are no, as Commissioner, I cannot mention each and every meeting I have. Of course, I'm aware of Khojaly. Of course, I met with them, but I also met with many people that suffered and went through torture, that lost their loved ones in Armenia and in Azerbaijan. So, the fact that I didn't mention one particular issue in one or the other country is of, it is not really something that I want to politicize with. I urge you to read the report and to see my messages in relation to all victims. But here I'm also asking you, not personally, but delegates from both countries, to stop these endless accusations, because they are not bringing anything to anyone. The justice has to be served when it comes to violations and crimes from both sides. And you know that there were crimes on both sides. I spoke to people that lost their loved ones long ago and recently. And because of them, we should take another step and look into the future. And respecting all the victims, including the stories and testimonies I heard from people from Khojaly, but also many other places that I visited, not only related to Armenia, Azerbaijan. You know the country I come from, And you know that I'm from Sarajevo, from Bosnia and Herzegovina. So I do understand what it means when you see that justice is not served in the right place. But the only way forward is the truth, reconciliation, and justice that needs to be served. And in my report, my clear message to both governments is to start working together on a human rights roadmap for peace. Otherwise, we will never get anywhere. From distinguished Armenian colleague, the question is related to the importance or the effect of the office or the international institutions when countries do not abide by the rules or judgments. I'll be very direct here. I mean, it is up to you. It is your responsibility, the responsibility of the states, member states that voluntarily agreed to abide by the rules when you became members of these organizations. You created a commissioner to remind you to address these issues. But the reason you are not doing it because there is a lack of political will. There is a clear dismantling of the international order if the court's decisions, national court's decision, international court's decisions, and the rule of law is pushed away. So we are eager, and the offices and many colleagues working in other international organizations to continue working and helping and assisting the states to comply with the rules that are voluntarily agreed upon. But we can do only as much as you wish to work with us. This is, as I already stated, a very bumpy road, and it's a very difficult task. You need determination, but also you need to be very honest. And I tried really during 6 years not to be sugaring or quoting any decisions or statements I made in order to really push away the real problem when it comes to grave human rights violations. But the problem is really in your corner, member states. There are states that do wish to work with the Office of the Commissioner and other great monitoring bodies of the Council of Europe and possibilities for technical assistance, and that is visible when it comes to the rule of law, freedom of the media, and many other issues, like in Armenia, for example, the action plan. But I would also like to see an action plan where this organization could work on Karabakh region and human rights roadmap leading to the peace process. But it can only do so if there is an agreement from both sides. If we fail, then I see it as a failure of two states more than anything else. At least that's how I see it. Roma, of course, I would like to see more done when it comes to this community. Recently, I had country visit to Germany where I had an opportunity to attend amazing event together with my team where art and culture were used in order to show how important it is to open our eyes, our borders, our horizons, and reach out to diversity and everything that makes our societies better. Unfortunately, the problem is from segregation in schools in many countries that I raised in many of my country reports, anti-Gypsyism that I already stated, the issue also related to transitional justice. At the beginning of my mandate, I was in Birkenau, where Roma genocide was commemorated, and there we also try to see this angle that is often neglected in discussions. But Roma rights is something that was always very high on the agenda of Commissioner's office, and I know that this will for sure stay there. When it comes to the organization, of course, it depends on many other decisions that have to be made. But what I would also like to see is more attention paid to people with disabilities. Somehow I see that that group is particularly neglected. So I think that was all.
So, Madam Mijatovic, at this point, on behalf of the Assembly, I want to thank you for answering the questions. And once again, I want to thank you for serving as our Commissioner this Assembly. Thank you once again. All the best to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
So, dear colleagues, the Assembly will hold its next public sitting tomorrow afternoon at 2:30 p.m. with the agenda which was approved earlier today. I invite you to be in the hemicycle at your seats in good time for the address for His Excellency Mr. Nikos Christodoulidis, President of the Republic of Cyprus, at 2:30 p.m. The sitting is adjourned.